Hey again, I filmed it, I did it all, and it didn't totally work, so this is part 2. I apologize. I'll check in to make sure that I don't do again and waste 20, 30 minutes of my life. Anyway, 2 classifications, getting back to it. We should know that really money can be classified into different kind of groups. The first has to do with this concept of liquidity. And liquidity has to do with the ease, the relative ease at which an asset, a good, a thing that has value for us, can be broken and turned into kind of cash, can be used as a medium of exchange. The more liquid it is, the easier it is for me to exchange that good, to convert it to cash. So some good that's highly liquid would be examples: traveler's checks, bank deposits, currency. I can take that bank deposit out, that check, and I can get cash right away. Currency itself, very liquid, right? So liquidity, big concept, get it, has to deal with how quickly we can turn that asset into a medium of exchange. The more liquid it is, the easier it is. We can break that down into M1. The first class is an M1. It's the most liquid assets there are. Again, how quick we convert these checks into cash, the cash into cash. On the other hand, a good could be illiquid, like the yacht that I own. That's going to take some time for me to kind of sell it and to become cash, or the large mansion that I own, or the helicopter. So M1, easy. Whereas M2, just making sure it's recording, good. M2, this is more broader. It's more difficult to become liquid cash. Examples: savings deposits, money market accounts, time deposits. There's CDs. These are, I own 30-year CD. In the future, that will be worth more money, but I can't really convert it into cash right away. I can, but it will face a penalty. There still has to be somebody that will buy that CD from me. It's not as easily convertible. This is a certificate of deposit, not like the Wu-Tang Clan CD or the Rihanna CD. Money market funds. We'll talk about funds in a bit. These are difficult to convert directly into cash. So this is broader, it's near money, again, these are all assets. I want the, funds, and I want savings deposits, but I can't relatively convert them to cash just as easy. M1 and M2 are often earn little to no interest. There's other classifications, M3, M4. They're generally safer, and that's why they don't earn as much interest on it. So the opportunity cost of holding, the value of what you're giving up on liquid money, is the interest you could be earning, right? What you could have been doing had you not had it. All right, let's move on to the financial sector. Financial sector really refers to the institutions, the people that allow us to borrow and lend money, that help us in the exchange of money. Individuals, businesses, and governments borrow and save, so they need institutions to help. Boom, that's the financial sector allows that. Think of banks that allow us to store money, to borrow money. Stock markets, pension funds. When you get older, you'll have these accounts. Those are part of the financial sector. They allow you to borrow money, to lend money, and all that. An asset is anything tangible or intangible that is owned, right? So if I own stock in a company, that's not really tangible, it's intangible. I can't grab part ownership of the stock. I can't physically touch it. Yet it is an asset, right? My house that I bought, that's an asset, right? I can physically touch it. It's tangible. It counts towards my wealth. Cool? Couple of other vocab terms you need to know. A liability. A liability is anything that is owed. So if we take out a loan again, it is agreement between a lender and a borrower. Here's a loan. I agree to pay it back. Usually loans I have to pay interest rates for giving me that loan. That's a liability to me. I have to pay back that loan. Okay, that's an asset for the lender, right? Because they have the money. That's an asset. They get that. For me, it's a liability. I can't really count the loan that I owe as part of my wealth as an asset. It's a liability for me. It's kind of a negative. I have to pay that back. A loan is an asset for the lender and a liability for the borrower, right? So if I were to give you all student loans, I want everybody to go to college. If you can't afford it, I will provide you a loan, right? On top of that loan, you have to pay me an interest rate, right? So that's the money that I loaned you at an interest rate. Here's Mr. Clifford going to help us get a little more key concepts.
Hey, how you doing, Econ students? This is Mr. Clifford. Welcome to ACDC Econ. Right now, we're going to cover some of the vocabulary that you need to understand the financial sector. I'm making this short video to help you differentiate between all these key terms. Let's start with a very basic one. There's a huge difference between income and wealth. Income is the amount of money that comes to individuals for doing their job. But wealth is the accumulated value of all their assets. An asset is something that you own that has value. So for a student, your car, your clothes, your video game console are all examples of assets. In addition to assets, there's also liabilities. Liabilities are financial obligations that you have to pay. So if you have a student loan or a car loan, that's a liability. Now these examples I'm using are for an individual, but it also applies to businesses. They too have assets and liabilities. And so does the government. Let's talk about the government's income. The government taxes individuals and businesses and gains tax revenue. If in a given year they spend less than their tax revenue, then they have a budget surplus. But that hasn't happened much in the United States. Instead, we run a budget deficit. That's when annual government spending is greater than the tax revenue. And that brings us to the difference between the deficit and the debt. A budget deficit shows that the government is overspending in 1 year. But when you add up all those budget deficits, you come up with the debt, which is right there. Yeah, I know. Let's go back and talk about financial assets. One of the key terms you're going to see is the idea of liquidity. Liquidity is how easy it is to convert an asset into cash without losing a lot of time or money. For example, if your asset was a house, that's not very liquid. It takes a lot of time, energy, and money to turn around and sell a house. Now, there's 3 types of financial assets that I want to talk about to help you understand the difference. The first one are loans, which is an agreement between lenders and borrowers. Now, obviously, when you lend money, you expect to get something in return, and that's called an interest rate. You're going to be learning a whole lot about interest rates and using them when you learn about banking and monetary policy. Now, it's time for a question. Is a loan an asset or is it a liability? Well, it depends. Are you lending the money or are you borrowing the money? So for the lender, it's an asset, and for the borrower, it's a liability. The second financial asset that you're going to see is the idea of bonds. Bonds are IOUs issued by the government or businesses. So for example, if a business needs some money to buy some equipment, it can issue a bond, and they promise to pay back that money plus the interest rate to the person who bought the bond. And that same process also applies to governments. The last financial asset I'm going to talk about is the idea of stocks. Stocks are shares of ownership in a company, and unlike bonds, it is not an IOU. You're actually a partial owner of that corporation, and you're entitled to some of their profits. Now, I bet you took this economics class expecting to learn a whole lot more about stocks, but unfortunately, that's not really what we talk about. Although the stock market fluctuates and goes up and down with the general economy, it's not really an economic indicator. In general, the stock market doesn't cause the economy to go up or down. It reacts to when the economy is going up or down. Now that you have a general understanding of some of the key vocab, you're ready to move on to harder concepts in this unit. You're going to talk about money, banking, and something called monetary policy. If you like these videos, make sure to subscribe. Also, take a look at the next video that's going to explain the 3 functions of money and the unit playlist that has a bunch of videos explaining all the key concepts and all.
All right, thank you, Mr. Clifford. Let's note the difference between personal finance and investment. At the beginning of the year, I asked you, what is investment? That's what we originally thought was, well, the amount of stocks we own and how much assets we own. That's investment. Well, no. Investment, again, in econ refers to the business spending, the money that businesses spend on tools and machinery. You don't need to write this down. We already wrote that. Again, personal finance is rather the amount of money that we own and how we spend our money and what we do, the stocks that we own. That's personal finance, right? How we manage our assets. You don't need to write this down, but personal finance refers to the way individuals, families budget, save, and spend. If you were in my academic class, we would be looking more at this applicable stuff, talking about credit cards, savings accounts, stock markets. AP, we're talking big picture. This is more kind of at the individual level. So again, personal finance determines how individuals personally handle their money, their savings, their spending. Whereas investment, again, you know this, business spending. Again, we just took the test. This would be the I, investment. Okay, moving on. Oh, good point. And low interest rates will increase investment. Why? Well, the money is cheaper, right? An interest rate is money in addition that you have to pay back on a loan. So if the interest rate is high, I have to pay 50% plus the amount that I took in a loan. I'm not going to take that loan. That's a large interest rate for that loan, right? So spending, investment spending, consumer spending decreases when the interest rate is high. It's an inverse relationship. I got my house for $3.99 interest rates over 30 years. I have to pay the loan that I took for the house, and I have to pay that off plus 3.99 annually. Pretty good interest rates. The Deacons just refinanced their house. Their interest rate is 3.65, I believe. So because it's a low interest rates and it's historically low, that encourages consumer spending, right? And we'll talk about with monetary policy how the Fed, the Federal Reserve, monetary policy, opposite of fiscal policy, or not opposite, but the other type, how they kind of control the interest rates to speed up or slow down the economy. There's talks, Janet Yellen, the Fed chair, might up the interest rates. Is that going to speed up or slow down spending? The interest rates are higher. Spending will decrease, consumer spending, investment spending, because we're going to be less likely to take out that loan. I'm going to share with you this video.
Hi, my name is Sarah Glakus, and I'm with InvestingAnswers.com.
Keep paying attention.
Today, we're going to talk about some pretty important information you need before you start investing, and that is the difference between stocks, bonds, and funds. Let's start with stocks, a word you've probably heard before. A stock is simply an ownership interest in a company. So, if there's a company out there that you've always dreamed of owning, you can go into the stock market, buy one share of stock, and you're an owner. Investing in individual stocks is great for some people, but it tends to be a little bit risky. Stock prices fluctuate from day to day, and they can fluctuate by a lot. So you could buy a stock today for $100, and by tomorrow, for reasons that you might not even understand, the price could go down to $90 or lower. So, if you want to start with something a little safer, bonds may be the answer. Bonds are much safer than stocks because a bond is like an IOU. You're lending a company money, and it's promising to pay you back plus interest. That promise, which is legally binding, makes bonds a lot safer than stocks. But for most people, the most important investment term to understand is funds. If you have only one investment, it will most likely be a fund. A fund is simply a collection of stocks, or a collection of bonds, or even a collections of stocks and bonds together. Instead of buying just one stock or one bond, you can buy a fund that holds a basket of many different stocks, or many different bonds. It's the ultimate in one-stop shopping. There are three main types of funds: index funds, mutual funds, and exchange-traded funds. An index fund tracks an index, like the S&P 500. The index fund simply buys all the stocks that make up the index. For example, an S&P 500 index fund will buy all 500 stocks that are in the S&P 500. If the S&P 500 index goes up, the S&P 500 index fund will go up too. Mutual funds usually try to do even better than an index fund. A mutual fund manager tries to buy stocks that will outperform and sell stocks that will underperform. If the fund manager makes the right choices, your mutual fund will do better than an index fund. But if the fund manager makes the wrong choices, your fund will do worse. That's the risk you take when you buy an actively managed mutual fund. Finally, there are special funds called ETFs, which stands for exchange-traded funds. ETFs are very similar to mutual funds and index funds, but they trade like stocks and they have slightly different tax rules. Ask your tax professional for more information. Thanks for spending time with us at Investing Answers. For more investing definitions, check out our financial dictionary.
All right, so a little bit more on stocks and bonds. Bonds are essentially IOUs. You get the money, they issue you a bond, you have to pay back that bond with some money on top of it. You want to start a lemonade stand, you don't have the money to do so, so your grandma says, well,